morning today. We have a faculty candidate visiting. This is Dr. Shrestha1. He's coming to us most recently from the University of Miami at Ohio, where he is a visiting assistant professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. He got his PhD from Louisiana Tech in engineering with specialization in electrical and micro-nanoscale systems. And then he spent several years at Indiana University, Purdue University in Indianapolis, where he worked on a huge number of projects, and I'm fascinated by all of them. His general research area is smart sensing systems, and we look forward to hearing your talk.
Thank you, Dr. Babu, for the introduction. Also, thank you for being here. So my area of talk is going to be about sensing systems for a number of applications. I'll talk about a number of applications, but this is something that I'm broadening into a larger area of applications. This is going to be the outline of my presentation. I'm going to talk about one of the projects that I've been working on for a number of years now. This is an NSF-funded project, and I will talk about how we got started on this project and different parts of the project, and I'll share some of the results that I have, and also what we want to do, what we're doing currently in this project. And then I'll talk about a little broader. It connects to the previous project, but it kind of broadens the application. And this is something that I want to work on in the future, so I'll talk about that as well. And I have all the stuff plans and some of the proposals that I want to go for. And I'll just give you an idea of some of the TC and electricity program experience that I had. And thank people. And I'll answer any questions you might have. Having said that, if you have any questions and if you want to ask questions during my presentation, I'll be happy to answer them. So the first project is the smart sensor for detecting low blood glucose episodes from human breath. And I'll talk about its background results and some of the current status of it. So before I talk about the project itself, I want to give a pretty general idea of what is in the breath. So it turns out when you inhale air and exhale, it is mostly still the air. It is in our air is close to 80%, 78% nitrogen, and there's oxygen and carbon dioxide. And inhale and exhale, still it is mostly nitrogen with reduced amount of oxygen and elevated amount of carbon dioxide. But and then we inhale a lot of things from the air, we exhale them. But besides that, there are also a number of compounds that actually comes out of our breath that is part of our body that comes either from our lungs or our stomach or through the alveolar air or from our mouth. So these, it seems that these compounds are related to different kind of disease and problems or general health of our body. And the way it comes out, because when you exhale the breath, it picks up stuff from from the blood in the lungs, and that's where and the things that goes with our body and things that gets injected into the breath that comes out our breath, exhaled breath, and these actually are correlated with many kind of disease and health conditions of us. And actually, it is not really new. There, and even really a long time ago, people used to, even if it was actually being a medical process of looking into, people have a sense of different smell of breath and try to detect disease. For example, people who have, diabetes, they tend to have a little sweeter breath, and so things like that. But more recently, when more in medical terms, it was late 1960s when people started looking into what is the breath and if it is correlated with any kind of disease we have. And there are a number of works in this area, and there are a number of people working on it. And throughout this time, people have also found correlation between these compounds and not a large variety of disease. And now there are two paths to it. One, looking into the breath and trying to see the compound itself and trying to detect disease if we can. The other way is to make the sensors and if you can, use the sensor to detect those compounds and then correlate with the disease. So there are two ways into looking into that. and there are people looking into both direction. And besides the breath, also the compounds that are emitted, and they are usually they are called volatile organic compounds. And whenever I say compounds here, I'm referring to volatile organic compounds. These are the compounds that are comes off of either the samples or the perspiration, things like that. So even the things that comes out of our perspiration also contains information about our health. Besides that, also from tissues or blood sample, even the things comes out of those samples, they have markers of disease, and people are trying to correlate that with certain kind of disease to develop modalities to detect disease. So that this project actually it was inspired by dog in a way. Now you probably know about medical dogs and the dogs that can detect an explosive and things like that. But there are something called diabetic alert dogs. These are also medical dogs, but these are trained to detect diabetes from, non-invasively detect diabetes from people. These dogs can detect both high level of blood glucose and low level of blood glucose, and hyperglycemia or hypoglycemia in medical terms. And I'll call this hypo for low blood glucose level. So these are trained, and these dogs can actually sniff out, they can smell this problem and can detect this condition. This was especially, there are a lot of people looking at it because they are interested in it, and it seems many of these dogs can actually detect these more accurately than some of the medical modalities that we have. But for the diabetes, and especially for type 1 diabetes, and also particularly for kids with type 1 diabetes, these medical dogs, or diabetes alert dogs, are very important. The reason is because kids with type 1 diabetes, they have they have diabetes for a long time. Once they have diabetes for a long time, over time they lose sense of when they go to low blood glucose level, and that is where these kids can go to low blood glucose level anytime. And as in the sense of this low blood glucose level is that we feel kind of weakness, but once you have it for a long time, especially with the kids, they lose the sense of this feeling, and that puts them in harm's way. For example, if their blood glucose levels go really low and they do not know it, they can become unconscious, and they can if nobody's around, they can push them into harm's way, and sometimes it can lead to brain damage and things like that. For that reason, these kids usually they needed to be checked for blood glucose level regularly, and many times they use something called continuous blood glucose monitors. These are something they would have something going into their abdomen and measure blood glucose level continuously. It is an invasive process, and for that reason, because these kids need to be monitored all the time, their parents can't let them play alone or go outside alone, and they have to be tested regularly, and they usually do that with a glucometer, finger prick monitors. But even with that, they cannot administer it by themselves. So some adults need to be around, and they need to administer it. Puts a constraints to a kid's life. And these diabetes alert dogs, because they can sense it, they would give them more freedom. That's where parents were really interested, and even doctors were really interested in diabetes alert dogs. And they can actually, there has been scientific studies where it has, they improve patients' lives a lot. But the problem with this is that it takes a long time to train these dogs. It takes 6 months to a year, but there are not enough supplies. People have to wait for several years to get the diabetes trained dogs. But the other problem is it's very expensive. It costs up to $25,000 to $30,000 to train a dog. And with the dogs, some of the dogs are really good. They detect it with accuracy more than 95%, but sometimes they are not as good. So it is hard to kind of rely on them all the time. So when we came to know about it, and then we we were interested to make a sensor, so do this something similar to what dogs do, but with an electronics device. And that's where we got interested into it. Can we make a device that will do the same thing, that will detect hyperglycemia or low blood glucose episodes with kids? And for our advantage, one of the collaborators that we're working now, she is a pediatrician, and she also works with a pharmaceutical company in Indianapolis. And as part of their outreach program, she was interested in it in a way to help to train dogs better way and faster. And we talked to her. They had done really systematic work. And one of the things we're looking into is dog really sensing it from the breath and perspiration, or dog is just looking at physical expression, right? Dogs can also look at your physical expression and detect things. So we wanted to differentiate that. If it is a physical expression, it may not be possible to make a sensor, but if it is something that's coming out of people's breath or perspiration, it may be possible to make a sensor. So, but they have done really scientific study, training dogs and actually testing dogs with the breath and perspiration samples, sweat samples, and there was a scientific study showing that they were detecting things from the perspiration or sweat and the breath. And that's where we got started on this project. Now, once we make this device, the goal was something like a breathalyzer kind of device that kids can carry around, right? And they can breathe into it whenever needed, and they can look at their blood glucose level. And this would be something that the kids or persons with type 1 diabetes can carry around, and because now kids can administer it themselves, they can do it as needed, periodically, or whenever they have any feelings, they can test it right away. So that was the goal of it. And then this is also non-invasive. And one of the things we wanted to do with it, because we're going to implement this with kids, we wanted to also have a way to send the information to parents and caregivers. So whenever a kid tests for it, if the outcome looks good, or if there's any problem, the information will also be sent to the caregiver or care provider or parents. For that, we also wanted to have kind of communication capability to it. That's where we combine it as a smart sensing system, where it has a sensing capability, signal analyzing capability, and sending the information, displaying it on the device, and sending the information to the user. Now for this, there were 3 main tasks, and I'll talk about, again, when I talk about another project, I'll talk about dogs a little bit more, and how dogs sense and things like that. But in the meantime, just to give an idea, to be able to detect something from, with the sensor and give the output, there are 3 major things to it. One is the sensing the compound itself. Second is processing, and third is displaying, right? And for us, the first thing we wanted to do is, what is in the breath that dogs are detecting? We wanted to make sure that we know the compound so that we can make sensors and then develop the system. So first task for us was to look into the breath and look into what is in the breath that changes when someone goes to hypo. So that was our first task. And for the second task, we wanted to develop sensors that will detect some of these compounds that we're seeing in the breath. And we wanted to make them sensor array, which are not a large number, but also consumes less power. So that was the things we're looking into. And the third, to use the sensors and put in the emitter system and take the signal and analyze that and differentiate between normal condition and the hyper condition, and make that decision. Once you have the decision, send it to a smartphone, display it on the device itself, also send it to a smartphone, and the smartphone, and then it can be looked at. We can look at the history of it and also analyze the information, but also the other people who are involved, like the parents and care providers, can look at it as well. So there were the 3 major tasks we wanted to look at. And the first track was to collect breath, collect breath samples and look at it. And for that, this was done with the collaboration with somebody in chemistry, and also with the doctor I mentioned. She's a pediatrician, and they have something called youth diabetes camp where kids with type 1 diabetes come and play together, and they spend about a week. So we thought that was the best place to go and collect breath. So this is what, essentially, people breathing into, special kind of bags that was made for collecting breath. People breathe into it when they come in the morning, when they are normal, and then and there were medical people who would test them periodically if they have any problem. And once they, if anyone has low blood glucose level, and our people run to them, and they would collect the breath. So that's how we collected breath. And we also implemented a second type of breath collection because we also wanted to see how things progress when it goes from normal to low level. And for that, we needed to see at the breath along the way. And this is something called hypoglycemia clamp study. It's basically inducing low blood glucose level one step at a time and collecting samples. And it was also done by one of our collaborators in medical school. And one of the interesting thing about detecting things, the hypoglycemia especially from breath, is that it was more anecdotal. That people who had these diabetic alarm dogs, they mentioned that these dogs can actually detect things even before you can measure it using finger pricks, or even before it appears in glucometers. So dogs would they would usually either bark or nose at you when there is a problem, and they would do it and they would measure it. There's nothing, but after a couple of minutes they will have this. So from there, there was something that maybe there is something in the breath that actually comes before actually seeing things in the blood. So for that reason, we also wanted to see the progression of the things. So we implemented two methods. We have the person in chemistry, to analyze this using something called CMS, to look into actually the molecular structure of the breath and look at all the compounds that are in the breath. And then from there we did statistical analysis to find out these compounds in the breath. What are these significant compounds that actually changes from when it's all right when there is a problem, and looking at can we accurately distinguish these using some of these compounds that we have. And you can see some of these are results here. This is how the CMS stress actually looks like, and that actually relates to there's a program that gives a list of compounds, and running that compound, and we chose 7 compounds, and using 7 compounds when you separate that, it seems you can tell if it is a low blood glucose level with 91% accuracy, and normal with 80%. And this is one of the studies, but this is something that's ongoing. And the second, we wanted to use the sensor. We use this, once we know what is in the thing, we wanted to build the sensor arrays. And when you do that, and one of the reasons we wanted to make the sensor, we needed to make the sensors because there are the sensors that are commercially available. They're really good sensors. Either they are really big, they are based on molecular analysis or electrochemical, or looking into based on microfluidics and things like that. And there are others which are these are usually made of metal oxide semiconductors, and they usually needed to be heated to get good sensitivity, and they need heater that consumes a lot of power, and these are bulky. And we wanted to make something that is sensitive enough so that it can sense some of these compounds in our breath that's really in small concentration, and also be able to do that with low consumption of power. And the other thing is, in our breath, there is a large amount of water vapor, so close to 100% humidity, right? We need something that doesn't respond to water and some of the major component of our breath, and usually including carbon dioxide and oxygen, nitrogen, and some of the other like acetone and things like that. And for that region, we looked into a number of materials, and we chose something called PVDF-HFE, and we liked it because it was a polymer that doesn't degrade. It lasts for a long time. It doesn't degrade fast, and something that also doesn't respond to water. So we like this material. We could. This is something that you can change the material property and make it sensitive to a lot of different things. And we basically made, most of the sensors that we made were resistive sensors, just the sense resistance that changes the sensor that changes the resistance when there is something. But we also use something called QCM. It helps to making sensor. You can get really good sense of how things are working. But this is more of the quality control and initial testing. And this material actually we made this for us, and when it is for us, you can add a lot of materials to it, make different kind of sensors and change the sensing property. One of the good thing about being able to change sensing property is that you can make an array of sensors by using the same material by changing some of the configuration to it or some of the surface properties of it. That is the reason we also like the BDF-HFV. And this is how we test our sensors. When we test our sensors, we test with individual component of it, and then we're introduced in take an air and introduce in a different make it humid and also do different compounds and test the sensors. And then our sensor will be the test chamber and look into it. So, and initially, some of this initial sensor we actually used nitrogen as a carrier gas, but we later used air because that is the when we actually use the breath, that is going to be the carrier gas. So we decided to use air as a carrier gas later on. So I have some representative results here. This is one of the sensors of composite of some PVDF-HFV, carbon particles, and carbon nanotubes. And you can see how it responds to a different concentration of acetone, and you can detect really small, something 42 parts per million. It can really detect small, and you can see with the concentration changes. So this is the place where we introduce acetone, and this is the place where you introduce nitrogen goes up, when you introduce acetone it goes down, and the response increases with the concentration, but you can see that's more or less linear with the concentration and the resistance change. We also looked at response and recovery times, because that's also important. You want to be some sensor that responds pretty quickly, and something if recovery time is in how fast it goes back to the original state, so you can use it again. And we had three different variations of this sensor. So we use if you just look at one of these results here, it is hard, you cannot differentiate. We tested this with one of these compounds here. You cannot distinguish between them just looking at the response of one sensor. But with the three various sensors, when you run PCA, we could differentiate all of these compounds. So acetone is here, water is here, 2-ES here, ethyl hexyl acrylate is here, and ethanol and isoprene. These are all the components of the breath. So we could differentiate them from the three sensors that we had. The second variations of the sensors we made, it is still with the PVDF-HFV, but with the carbon particle and PU composite sensors. And we were making the sensor to make more differentiation between one and the other sensors. And with this, when there is something called PU layer and there's no PU layer, for example, this one here, the blue dotted lines are just these two materials, and the red line is when you add another layer to it, you can see the differences in responses. This is for acetone, this is for ethanol. So the good thing here is when it is with acetone, the response increases when you add the layer, but with the you can see the difference here. But with the ethanol, it increases much more. So that gives a more differentiation between the two gases we're trying to detect. Now with this one here, when you change the surface property, and we use IR exposure to do that, when you change the surface property, you can see the opposite effect. For the this PVDF, these two compounds, it increased the response, but with ethanol, but with acetone, with ethanol the response decreases, and that gives more differences, and that's the idea. So when you have different kind of response, you can differentiate them easily. And the third task here is to put the sensors in the system and test them as a system. Now, when we test the sensor, we test them as individual compounds, but when we test with the breath, it is not individual compounds, it's combine everything together, right? So at the system level, when you put the sensors with the other circuitry and test at the system level, we are more looking into the pattern of the sensors more than how it interacts with individual component of the breath. So that is our things we look into. We are not really the thing. If it doesn't, how it responds to, for example, acetone or some other compound is less important to us than how the sensor pad, the data pattern looks at when you are, when it is normal versus when the data pattern looks at when it is hypo or some other problem. So that was the kind we're interested in. And for that, this is the setup. This is something that we are just currently working on, and some of the testing that we're going to do in the future is that. So we're going to simply create a simulated breath, and as I mentioned before, it's basically a little bit more carbon dioxide, less oxygen with the air. So you're going to take air, add nitrogen and carbon dioxide, and make it, add humidity to it to make it, our exhaled breath is close to 100% humidity, and to make the type of breath and put it in a test chamber and have the sensor array collect the data and look into it, and how we want to see how it changes when, as I said, when it changes for the different stages of the. One is how the difference is between normal and when there's a problem. Also, how it progresses when you change from normal to the problem, so that potentially we can predict it before actually, it happens. That is one thing. Now, for here, the things we're looking into is you have to collect the data from the sensor. We have, recently acquired a DAC, and we're also using a simple microcontroller with circuitry to connect it with the MATLAB and LabVIEW to collect data. And once you have data, we look at the, do pattern analysis of the data to differentiate them. And then our goal is to create a robust training set. So ultimately, if we want to differentiate between a normal and a problematic case, we need to have a training set, right? We need to have a data that tells us if it is good or bad. So we need to create from this testing we do with the simulated breath, we have to create a training set for our sensors, and using that training set, we can predict when we do the actual testing. And at some point, we also want to do the testing with the collected breath sample. This would be something that our collaborators will collect, and they will ship to us, and then we will expose our sensor with basically the breath in the bag, and then see the response of the sensors when it is normal and when there is a problem. And we also compare that with how does it compare with the simulated testing, and then that's where it'll be. And then we ultimately want to implement all of that in a portable system, like a handheld device, so that because of our application, we wanted something that kids and persons with diabetes can carry around with them. So in very general, this is what it'll look like. The system will look like. The important part is having the sensors and integrating them with the microcontroller or single board computer, and then analyzing them, but also able to integrate a large number of sensors would be some of the problems we're trying to looking into solving, and then for the power battery management and wireless communication to communicate with the smartphone and things like that. And the other part of it is because we want this to be useful for kids and also for doctors and parents, and this is something that is the medical information. We're also looking into one of the collaborators office making to interface on a smartphone, and we're all looking at this security of the data so that this people can feel safe about their medical data. So that's something also we're looking into. Right. So my next topic is a smart sensing system for ambient detection. I'll talk about the background. I'll show you some of the preliminary results we have, and we to get initial results, we did something to detect food spoilage, how things look like when the foods are fresh versus they are spoiling, and also some results with that. And also looked at some of the work with the indoor air quality and how things look when you test with different indoor air pollutants. And I'll talk about where I want to go with this project. So first, this is you can think of something as a broader application of the project I just described. The previous project was to making a breathalyzer kind of device to tailor to very specific kind of application. And when I was working on this project, I realized that there are a lot of things that is actually coming off our body in terms of the compounds that we emit, and those are indicative of a lot of diseases and also our health and wellness. And there's actually quite a bit of study already relating to the compounds and the health problems and things like that. There are a number of people looking into, and I wanted to broaden it to possibly make a sensor that will detect this number of diseases, and plus something that I wanted to make more non-invasive, meaning something that people can carry around and look at our compound profile in a way that from the things that we emit, and the sensor would look into the compounds that our body emits instantaneously and also over time, and maybe possibly detect disease and also maybe prevent diseases and manage if we have any health problem. And also, if we look at our indoor air, oftentimes we do not realize that there are a lot of things in the air that are not very good for our health. And if we are exposed to this for a long period of time, it can cause health problems and cause there are evidence showing that it can cause cancers and things like that. So I wanted to look at make a device that looks at all of this and improves overall health and well-being of human being. So and then this is more, as I said, long-term monitoring instead of just looking at a snap of a time. How does our health is related to certain kind of compounds pattern in the place we live? Is there and over the time, if you look at, is there certain kind of compounds pattern in the air that is related to a certain kind of health problem, or certain kind of, for example, asthma, cancers, or our well-being in general, and can you use that to improve the health? So before I talk about the specific of this project, I want to use dogs. So many people ask sometimes, how do you know that there's actually things in the air? First of all, and you can detect and actually possibly differentiate that. And I use this as a tool to kind of verify that, or meaning that it is possible. So if you look at dogs, we know that dogs can detect bombs and things like that. And also, I talked about the medical dogs and diabetes on dogs. So, but also, dogs can detect a lot of things, and they have, the reason they can do is because their noses are very sensitive, and they have more than 300 million these olfactory receptors that actually gets these smell molecules, and they can actually detect close to 100 million times less material, less concentrated materials than we can detect ourselves. And they can detect something if you are in a enclosed football stadium, and if you have a perfume at one end of the stadium, they can detect at the other end. And they can detect, they can identify the trees around us. They can actually also identify birds in the trees. So that also means that there's things in the air that is possible if we have true tools and true analysis capability, we can actually detect that. So that's the thing. And then we also, and besides some of these things I mentioned, there are also a large number of studies going on where people are training dogs to detect a specific kind of disease.